And God said to him, "Your name will no longer be Abraham." Sit with that for a second. Not "your life will change," not "I will bless you," not "follow these instructions." The very first thing God does in this moment is change a name. One letter, that is all, one single letter inserted into the middle of a man's name, and suddenly everything is different. The man is different. The promise is different. The nations of the earth are different. Abraham becomes Avraham. 4 letters become 5. And if you grew up reading this in English, you probably moved right past it. Because in English, Abram and Abraham sound almost identical. You barely notice the shift. You think, okay, a small pronunciation change, ceremonial maybe, poetic perhaps. But in the Hebrew, that one inserted letter is not decorative, it is not poetic padding. It is doing something specific, something that carries weight that the English translation simply cannot hold. Because something is sitting inside that letter, and if you miss it, you miss the whole covenant. So let me slow down and explain what we are actually looking at here. In the ancient world, names were not labels. They were not what we do today, pick something that sounds nice, maybe a family name, maybe something from a baby name website. In the Hebrew Bible, a name is a description of reality. It tells you what a thing is, what it does, what it is for. So when God changes a name, that is not ceremony, that is not ritual, that is God rewriting what a person fundamentally is. Now, the man we are talking about starts his life as Abram, in Hebrew, Avram, and Avram already has a meaning. It means something like exalted father or father of height. Av means father, Ram means high, exalted, lifted up. So even before the change, this man is already carrying father in his name. But here is the problem: Avram has no children, his wife Sarai is barren, he is old, and yet his name has been saying father his entire life. There is a tension there that every reader of this text feels, a name that promises fatherhood to a man who has none. And then God arrives, and instead of giving him a child immediately, God gives him a letter. One letter, the Hebrew letter Hai, shaped like an open doorway, sounding like nothing more than an exhaled breath. And that letter lands in the middle of his name between Av and Ram, and Avram becomes Avraham. And with that single breath letter, the promise does not just expand, it explodes. The word in the original is Avraham, and we need to slow down long enough to hear what it is actually doing. Let us start with the surface. What does the name Avraham actually mean at its most basic level? The text tells us directly. God does not leave us guessing. Right there in Genesis 17, in the same breath as the name change, God says, "For I have made you a father of a multitude of nations." In Hebrew that phrase is Av Haman Goyim. Av father, Haman multitude, noise, crowd, overwhelming abundance, Goyim nations. Father of a multitude of nations. And scholars have long noticed that the name Avraham appears to fold that word Haman multitude right inside it. The inserted Hai is the beginning of Haman. The name is not just a title, it is a compressed sentence, a whole destiny packed into 5 letters. Think of it like this. Imagine someone hands you a seed, small, unremarkable, fits in the palm of your hand, and then they say, "Do you know what is inside this?" And you say, "It is just a seed," and they say, "No, inside this seed is a forest." That is what is happening with this name. Avraham looks like a name, it sounds like a name, but open it up and there is an entire forest of nations folded inside it. And here is what is remarkable: God does not wait to see if it happens. God does not say, "I will call you Avraham once the nations appear." God changes the name before the child exists, before the nations exist, before any of it is visible. The name arrives before the reality, because in the Hebrew understanding, the name is already the reality. It is already true in the unseen realm. The visible world just has not caught up yet. Now I want to read the passage again, but slower this time, because there are details sitting in this text that a fast reading will completely swallow. Genesis 17, verse 1. When Avram was 99 years old, the Lord appeared to Avram and said to him, "I am God Almighty. Walk before me and be blameless." Stop there. 99 years old, that is the first detail the text wants you to feel, not 30, not 50, 99. The man has been walking with this promise for decades. He has been carrying the name Avram, exalted father, for his entire life. and there is still no son from Sarai, there is still no multitude, there is still no nation. So when God appears at 99, there is a wait in that room, there is a history of waiting in that room, and God does not open by explaining the delay. God opens by saying, I am God Almighty, walk before me. And then verse 4. As for me, behold, my covenant is with you, and you shall be the father of a multitude of nations. That phrase, as for me, in Hebrew, ani haine, I behold, it is almost like God is planting both feet, stepping forward, making it personal, not here is a general divine principle, but I me specifically, my covenant with you specifically. And then verse 5. No longer shall your name be called Avraham, but your name shall be Avraham, for I have made you the father of a multitude of nations. Read that last clause again. For I have made you. Not I will make you, not I intend to make you, not if you obey I will make you. I have made you. Past tense, done, settled, complete. The child has not arrived, the nations do not exist, Sarai has not yet conceived, and God is already speaking in the past tense, as if it is finished, as if the only thing that still needs to happen is for time to catch up with what is already true. That is the Hebrew prophetic perfect, a grammatical form that treats a future certainty as already accomplished, and it only appears when the speaker has absolute authority over the outcome. God is not predicting, God is declaring. And the declaration lands in the name. Now I want to speak directly to something, because there is a group of people watching this channel for whom this name is not foreign at all. If you grew up speaking Arabic, you know this man as Ibrahim. If you grew up speaking Urdu, you have heard that name your entire life. In your family, in your masjid, in Quranic recitation, Ibrahim, the prophet, the friend of God, Khalilullah. And here is what I want you to notice. The root sitting at the beginning of that name, Ab, Av, is the same root across all three languages. Hebrew Av, Arabic Ab, Urdu Abba, father. You call your own father Abba in Urdu. You hear Abu in Arabic names every single day. Abu Bakr, father of Bakr, Abu Huraira, father of the kitten. The Ab root is everywhere in your language, you already know it, you have always known it. And that root is the first syllable of Avraham. Ibrahim, the same man, the same root, the same ancient word for father sitting at the beginning of the name in every language that descends from this part of the world. This is not coincidence, this is memory. These languages have been carrying this root for thousands of years without needing to be told to. It survived migrations and empires and centuries of separation, and it is still there, still saying father, still pointing back to the same man and the same promise. And the word Haman, multitude, that lives inside the name Avraham, in Arabic the root Hamana carries the sense of a great crowd, a gathering, an overwhelming presence. The noise of many, you hear it in different forms across Arabic literature. The languages are not strangers, they are carrying memory from the same family. And so when an Arabic speaker says Ibrahim, they are not just using a name, they are holding, without knowing it, the Hebrew covenant word for father of multitudes, every single time. That is not a small thing, that is thousands of years of a promise living inside the mouths of the very nations the promise was about. Because remember, Avraham was not promised to be the father of one nation. He was promised to be the father of a multitude of nations. And look around. Look at the Arabic-speaking world. Look at the Urdu-speaking world. Look at how many hundreds of millions of people carry some form of this name or call upon this man as their ancestor in faith. The multitude already exists. It has existed for centuries, and it was written into the name before any of it was visible. But even that is not the deepest layer. Because there is a moment in the text where this name stops being vocabulary and becomes an event, where the letter itself, that single breath of high, becomes the hinge point of the entire covenant. And that is where we are going next. So let us go back into the room. Genesis 17, the exact moment the letter lands. Avraham is 99 years old. God has just appeared to him, and we need to feel the weight of what 99 years means in this story. Because this is not the first time God has spoken to this man. This is not the beginning of the relationship. This man left his homeland decades ago because of a promise. He walked away from everything familiar, his country, his father's house, his people, because a voice told him to go. And he went. And then years passed, and the promise did not arrive. and he and Sarai tried to solve it themselves, and that created its own painful complications, and more years passed, and Avraham got older, and Sarai got older, and the gap between the promise and the reality kept widening. 99 years old. That is not a man at the beginning of hope. That is a man who has been living inside a promise for so long that the promise must have felt on certain nights like something he had imagined. And then God appears. And does not apologize for the wait, does not explain the delay, simply arrives and says, I am God Almighty, walk before me and be blameless, and I will make my covenant between me and you and will multiply you exceedingly. And then the text says something that I want you to feel. Then Avraham fell on his face. He does not speak, he does not ask questions, he does not negotiate, he falls on his face, because something in the presence of God in that moment is beyond words, beyond questions, beyond anything a 99-year-old man who has been waiting for decades knows how to say. And while he is face down on the ground, God speaks the name. No longer shall your name be called Avram, your name shall be Avraham. Think about the architecture of this moment. The man is prostrate, face in the dirt, unable to see, and God is above him speaking a new name over him while he cannot even lift his head to respond. The name is not given in a conversation between equals. The name descends, it is placed, it lands on a man who is already low enough to receive it. And the name that lands is Avraham. Now here is where I need you to slow down with me completely, because this is the moment everything turns on. The letter that is inserted, the Hebrew letter Hi, is one of the most unusual letters in the entire Hebrew alphabet. It has almost no physical sound, you cannot bite it, you cannot shape it with your lips or your tongue, you simply open your mouth and exhale. That is the letter, that is all it is, a breath, an open mouth releasing air. H. That is Hi. And this letter appears twice in the Hebrew name of God. Yod, Hi, Vav, Hi, the divine name, the name so sacred that Jewish tradition does not speak it aloud, contains Hi twice, the breath letter, twice. And now God takes that same letter from his own name and places it inside Avram's name. Read that again slowly. God takes a letter from his own name and gives it to a man. This is not poetic decoration. In the ancient understanding of Hebrew, letters carry essence. They carry divine energy, they are not symbols pointing to sounds, they are themselves units of creative power. God spoke the world into existence with these letters. And now God is taking one of his own letters and embedding it permanently into a human name. Avraham Aleph Bet Resh Mem 4 letters, Avraham Aleph Bet Resh Hi Mem 5 letters. The Hi lands between the Resh and the Mem, right in the middle of the second half of the name. And it changes not just the sound, it changes the meaning, the weight, the capacity of the name to hold what God is about to pour into it. Because Avram, father of height, is a personal title, it describes one man's dignity, one man's standing. But Avraham, father of a multitude of nations, is a cosmic assignment. It is not about one man's dignity anymore, it is about every nation that will ever come from him, every person who will ever call him ancestor. Every soul across every century who will trace their spiritual lineage back to this moment, this room, this man face down in the dirt. The Hi is the difference between a title and a destiny. And here is the line I need you to sit with. God says, I have made you the father of a multitude of nations. Past tense already done. But the child does not exist yet. Isaac will not be born for another year. The nations will not exist for centuries, millennia. And yet God speaks it as finished. This means the common assumption that the covenant is a promise about the future is not quite what we thought. It is not a promise. It is a declaration of what is already real in the unseen. The future is not uncertain to God. The multitude is not hypothetical. It already exists in the place where God speaks from. And the Hi, the breath, is what carries it from that unseen place into the visible world. God breathed into Adam and Adam became alive. A breath turned dust into a person. Now God breathes a letter into a name, and a childless old man becomes the father of nations. The breath does not wait for the biology to catch up, the breath makes the biology inevitable. And that changes how we read this completely. This is not a story about God helping a man who believed hard enough. This is a story about God breathing reality into existence through language, through a name, through one letter that sounds like nothing more than an exhaled breath.
H.
That is the sound that split the world in three. I want to leave you with this. We started with a question. Why one letter? Why not a whole new name? Why not a grand renaming ceremony with new words and new syllables and something that sounds completely different? Why just one breath? And I think the answer is sitting right there in the simplicity of it. Because God did not need to erase Avraham. Avraham was already carrying something real. Father, that was always true, that was always in him, the capacity for fatherhood, the identity of fatherhood. It was there before the child. It was there before the covenant. It was there in the name his parents gave him before any of this began. God did not replace the man, God expanded him. One letter, one breath, and the container of the name became large enough to hold what was coming. I think about that sometimes in relation to people. How often we think transformation means demolition, that to become something new you have to tear down everything old, that the old self must be destroyed before the new self can arrive. But this text is showing us something different. God looks at a 99-year-old man lying face down in the dirt, a man with decades of waiting behind him, a man who tried to solve the promise himself and made a mess of it, a man who has failed and doubted and kept walking anyway, and God does not say start over. God does not say you are the wrong person. God does not erase the name. God adds a breath. Just a breath, and that is enough. That is all it takes to change everything. Avraham. Say it slowly, Avraham. Feel where the high sits, right there in the middle. An exhale landing between what the man was and what he is becoming, between the personal and the universal, between one family and all nations. That breath is still moving. It moved through Isaac, through Jacob, through 12 tribes and centuries of wandering and exile and return. It moved through Ishmael and through the Arabic-speaking world that calls this man Ibrahim. It moved through every Urdu-speaking child who has ever been named Ibrahim by parents who wanted something of that ancient promise to live in their son. The breath is still in the name. Every time someone speaks it, Ibrahim, Abraham, Avraham, that high is still being exhaled, still moving through time, still carrying the same covenant forward. One letter given once, to one man lying face down in the dirt. And it has not stopped sounding yet. That is what Hebrew does. It does not just record history, it breathes history forward. It puts the living sound of the covenant inside the mouth of every person who speaks these names, whether they know it or not, whether they are Jewish or Muslim or Christian or none of those things. The name does not ask permission, it just keeps moving. And perhaps that is the most honest thing this text has to say, that the promises of God do not depend on our ability to see them coming. Avraham could not see the nations, he could not see Isaac, he could not see any of it. He was 99 years old and face down in the dirt. And the breath landed anyway. If this opens something for you, share it with one person, someone who loves language, someone who grew up with Ibrahim on their tongue but never knew what was folded inside that name. Someone who has always felt that the text was deeper than they were shown. That person needs to see this, not because it is clever, but because this is their inheritance too. The breath in that name belongs to them as much as anyone. Subscribe if you have not, because next time we are sitting with Moshe, the Hebrew name that a pagan Egyptian princess gave to a Hebrew baby she pulled from the river. And what that name reveals about how God works is going to completely reframe everything you thought you knew about where holiness comes from and who gets to carry it. That one is not what you expect. I will see you there. This is the Ibrahim letters where the oldest words are still speaking if you slow down long enough to hear them.